Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. We cannot believe that this is episode 36. And we're so excited to be flying today with our favorite technical engineer, Chris Brown. And we are going to get started right at the top of the hour. Welcome to Zeitgeist Design and Production. I'm Becky Kiefer, Studio Director, and this is Journey 36 of the Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. Here inside the Zeitgeist Creative Studio in Pasadena, California, imagination rules and time is always of the essence. This is where immersion artists Ryan Harmon, Joe Cicero, and the world's top experienced designers study the past and spin the present, envisioning the future of location-based entertainment, or what we like to call UXIRL, user experiences in real life. The Spirit of the Time Zoomcast offers a sneak peek behind the themes. Each month, we move you without a ride system, inviting one incredibly talented and influential colleague aboard our time machine. We set controls for milestone moments in that person's career and attempt to unravel the mystery of what makes a guest experience timely yet timeless. And because we're live, you can type questions into the chat box, and our passenger will answer them after the hour-long journey. Climbing aboard our time machine today is Chris Brown, who was born with a brain that effortlessly straddles both the incomprehensibly technical and whimsically imaginative, allowing this creative engineer to have played leading roles in designing and building some of the world's most entertaining and spectacular, yet physically complex experiences, including Spaceship Earth, Epcot's Imagination Pavilion, Star Tours, The Great Movie Ride, Catastrophe Canyon, Muppet Vision 3D, Waterworld, and even the Slotzilla zipline on Fremont Street in Las Vegas. It's now my pleasure to introduce our time machine pilot, Zeitgeist President and Chief Creative Officer Ryan Harmon, along with the man whose last name is Brown, but should probably be purple, Chris Brown.
Okay. Wait, am I here? Am I here? Oh my God. Where's Joe? Oh my God, we lost Joe. We were in 1997 in Paradise, Nevada at the Evander Holyfield Mike Tyson fight where Mike bit off Evander's ear. It was so awesome. I've always wanted to go because that happened today in 1997. So I guess Joe's still there. Maybe he'll, I don't know. He was enthralled with the whole experience. But you got me and Chris Brown. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, Ryan. Great to see you.
Yeah, you too. I know you're in the throes of production on an exciting new Chris Brown experience. So maybe you'll share a little bit about that later.
Sure.
But let's get the journey started. Let's set the controls for, how about around 1963? It looks like we're in Anaheim and you are about 5 years old, sitting on a roof, watching Disneyland fireworks. Tell us what's going on here.
It is true. Yes, I grew up about 10 miles from Disneyland, and we used to climb up on the roof and watch the fireworks at 9 o'clock every night across the sea in Orange County. Yeah. So yeah, it was a great place to grow up, and got to go to the park a lot as a kid, which was great fun. Had a wonderful childhood with an extraordinarily lucky blessing of a family. So that's a nice situation to be in.
Yeah. So your
Much
dad
more
was,
about later.
yeah, your dad was in astro aeronautics and astro whatever for McConnell Douglas. Tell us.
Yeah, he was in aeronautics. He loved airplanes. He was born in 1914. So when he grew up, planes were like a new thing.
Oh,
So yeah, he gravitated to that exciting direction,
yeah.
uh, and graduated from Stanford, where both his parents were teachers. And
Wow.
and then when they formed the astronautics division, he was moved over from aeronautics when they founded it. So at the very beginning, so he was there from the dawn of time, and all
Wow.
the space flights and running off and watching things blow up on the pad and coming back on, oh, that didn't quite work. So yeah,
Right.
lots of learning.
Oh, so you had a little technical upbringing. He would go to Florida a lot for
He
launches.
went down for all the launches. Yeah, my mom would wake us up in the middle of the night and say, "You're going to watch this. Your dad's down there." And we're like, "It's cool. There's fire everywhere. This is awesome." And it's, it's rockets going to space. So that was pretty
Right.
awesome. So yeah, it's great. And we got
Wow.
to go tour the plants and see all those things. And we built a lot at home. He was an
Wow.
extraordinary gentleman, a brilliant man, and very quiet, soft-spoken,
Yeah.
and knowledgeable. And then we would build stuff at home all the time. We're a big scouting family. He was an Eagle Scout. Myself and all three of my brothers were all Eagle Scouts. So all went through
Oh,
from Cub Scouts to Weebelos to Boy Scouts to Explorers to
yeah.
the
Wow.
whole journey. Lots of camping, lots of outdoor,
Yeah.
appreciating nature, all those things, and just a fascination for life.
Yeah.
It's
And
still
you race
going on.
go-karts too? Did you build go-karts or just race
Yeah,
them?
where I grew up, like, the guys all had motorcycles and the girls all had horses, if you will. Not everybody, but the people who could.
Yeah.
And so being demanding to be different, I raced go-karts and I got into cars very young and very early, and that's still happening. So both these many years later. Yeah,
So
I love
you,
cars. It's
like
great.
your dad, it sounds like you were kind of shy, and so you sought something that would help you, talk to people, and you got into magic. Tell us about
It's
that.
true. Yeah. When I was 7 years old, my dad had a good friend, Paul Smith, who was a vice president of sales for McDonnell Douglas, and he introduced all of us to magic. He was a friend with Milton Bill Larson, who founded the Academy of Magical Arts. He was charter member number 35, if I recall correctly.
Oh,
So he was one of the original people for the Academy of Magical Arts, the Hollywood Magic Castle, most famous magic
oh,
in the world. And he actually took me there for Sunday brunch for my 16th birthday because I
ooh.
was way into magic by then, performing all over the place and doing all kinds of things. Like, oh my God, this is so awesome. So, yeah. And then you can't be a member until you're 21. So I think a day after my 21st birthday, I went and took my audition and became a member, and I'm still a member. So that's been a
Wow,
few months now.
that's awesome.
Magic was a big thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So 1972, you are about 14 and a half, and somehow you are getting a job at Disneyland. How,
It's
how does that
true.
even
The
work?
dream of every kid who grows up in that area. So my oldest brother, Pete, had been in two Fantasyland parades. I think he's a reindeer and a penguin, if I recall correctly. And so I knew this was a possibility of things. So when I was like, hey, I could go do that. So got my mom drove me over, and I went in, and you dance and do the auditions and go through all that, and ended up getting cast as Dale the Chipmunk for Fantasy on Parade in 1972. Something
Wow.
Judy Sklar loved bringing up years later, and drove a little love bug as part of the love bug unit. Chip and Dale had
Oh,
little love
cool.
bugs racing around in circles around Herbie, who was going crazy, and a heavyweight police officer on a little itsy bitsy motorcycle. So it's quite comical, basically in a war with Herbie, and then Herbie would run around and knock him over and have fun. And we would just play with the crowd. It was great. It was really fun.
Oh, wow.
It was
So
a
it's
dream.
you also when you were in high school, you were doing some additional projects, or you had like a few companies already.
Yeah, I started the entrepreneurial spirit. Like I said, I was very quiet, shy, sort of off doing my own thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I performed as a magician all the time. And so I was doing that, birthday parties, and got up to sort of nightclubs and bars and realized I did not want to live my life in nightclubs and bars as a performer. Yeah, I love performing and I love being involved in theater. I was in drama club and all those things. I also taught drums. Started playing drums probably like 9 when I started, and by the time I was 13, I was like really into it. And so by the time I was 14 or 15, I was like teaching little kids to start learning how
Wow.
to play, which is good fun. And that was sort of the beginning of learning to teach. And
Yeah.
then just lots of other hobbies. I mean, started making movies with 8mm wind up brownie cameras. You send off your your film and you get it back in the mail 2 weeks later, and then you put it on your little editor and turn the crank with a light bulb behind it and see what you've got, and then physically splicing the film together, cutting
Yeah.
it together and learning how to do that. And same thing with audio recordings. I mean, lots of sound recordings and sort of special effects to things. Had a 4-track recorder. Wow, high-tech stuff.
Yeah.
I would have died to have like an iPhone and iMovie then. It was just like I couldn't even envision such a thing. The stuff that
Right. Right.
kids have today,
So
it's really different.
so something I think we see you into around 1974 is that you're not just doing your magic tricks, you're telling stories. And it sounds like
Absolutely,
tell us
absolutely.
about
That
that.
was, I mean, story raises the level of everything and connects to people. It's all about connecting to other people. That's what it's really about.
Yeah.
And it kind of, like you mentioned, I got into magic. I was a shy kid, and it's sort of like doing something special that makes you set apart from the crowd and doing things that no one else can do. And lots of kids would do what I call stunt magic, which is like, watch, I can do something crazy. And hey, look at that. It's
Wait, that
amazing.
again.
But it's just doing something as like, hey, watch this. And that was never really interesting to me because it's like, well, okay, if you could do a backflip, that's cool. I agree. But if there's a reason why there's an explosion, you do a backflip and suddenly it's, whoa, that was awesome. How did that all happen?
Yeah.
So I didn't like, here's a shiny ball that floats in space. It's like, woo, look at that. It was much better to have a tennis shoe that people know what it feels like in their hand and they can relate to it. And that's what I would levitate. So it's always something, uh, you know, that people can understand and have a touch and feel for, as opposed to just some weird thing. And then how that, why is it a tennis shoe, and how that whole structure works together as a story makes it a much more powerful and engaging performance.
Yeah.
There's
So
the difference between, there's 3 books that are brilliant. My favorite magic books called The Trick Brain, Showmanship for Magicians, and what's the third one? It's all about the mechanics, if you will, of how magic works, and then showmanship, and then the psychology behind that, on how to understand how your audience is thinking and how that works in, because that's really what you do.
yeah.
It's like, I don't want you to look over there, so I give you a reason to look over here, not say, don't look over there, unless I really want you to look over there. And then you say, don't look over there. Because
Right.
people are like, oh, I'm going to look over there.
Yeah.
Magic by Misdirection. That's the 3rd of the books in the trilogy. But
Oh.
yeah, just brilliant, brilliant stuff. And that served me well throughout my career and still going after all these.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're really excited by sort of where creativity and technology and art kind of blend together.
Absolutely. And it's an appreciation for all the different types of talent, if you will.
Yeah.
And for me, growing up with my dad, who invented and created and built things, we went on a tour around the country in 1967, so I was 9 years old, and went into the Smithsonian. We're walking through the Air and Space Museum. And he goes, come here. He goes, you see, there's a giant jet engine there. He goes, you see that red piece going across there? I said, yeah. He goes, I invented that. I came up with that idea and we built it and it worked really, really well. And I'm like, holy crap, my dad has stuff in the Smithsonian. This is
Wow.
amazing. I was like so impressed. So for me, creativity and technology were not, strange foreigners. They
Yeah.
were intimately linked.
Yeah.
So engineering is all about understanding, physics and how the science, if you will, of the real world works, and applying that to doing something useful, as opposed to just studying it for an altruistic, vision. It's
Right.
really applying physics to do something. So hence we get, cars and airplanes, and we get computers, and we get all these other things that are useful to us as humans.
Yeah.
And the story side connects the human side of that people back to, why you want to do it in the first place.
Right. Wow. So we're in 1977, you're 19, and you decide you want to work for WED Enterprises.
Well, I started working at Disneyland in 1976, in September
Right.
1976. I went down and I got a job pushing Pooh Bears on Main Street. I worked in the Emporium complex,
Oh, cool.
bookstore, candle shop, watches in the main Emporium. And then I ran the bookstore that summer. So summer 77, I was closing the bookstore every night. And I was standing there going like, I was in school at Cal Poly Pomona, an engineering school. And I'm like, "Ah, I love engineering. I love building things, but I don't want to build boring things. I've been in entertainment since I was 7, and I really wanted to marry those two somehow. And I was like, oh man, I'm not sure what I do. And then I go, you idiot, look around you. You're standing in the middle of it. So
Right.
I said, I'm going to be a WED Imagineer. At that time, WED Enterprises hadn't been renamed yet. At any rate, so I went to the human resources group at Disneyland and told them that I wanted to be Imagineer, and they're like, go away. So I said, no, I want to work at WED. And they're like, okay. So I had the human resources people there contact the human resource people up at WED, and it took some time. And I eventually got an interview up there with May Turner Moody and went up and got to tour around the building. They like gave me a tour, and then, just human resources sat down and talked to me. And they're like, well, I'm not sure what we could do. And I go, this is amazing. This is like the holy grail. I've got to figure out a way to do this. So I took a year and a half being in it, that annoying kid who just will not take no for an answer and go away,
Yeah.
and basically kept calling and pounding on doors, and came up with the idea of pitching a co-op program, which is a work study program. So the university had these for engineers at aerospace firms and things. I'm like, well, why can't you do that at WED? So I
Yeah.
told them, and they said, well, we have done co-ops, but only in architecture. And I said, you should really do an engineering
Right.
because you get to have a guy who's nearly graduated as an engineer, and they're almost free because I get,
Yeah.
study credit. So in March of 79, I transferred up from Disneyland to WED. And they had no idea what to do with me. But I was just wide-eyed, again, very quiet, walking around, asking questions like, well, how does this work? And who does that? And can I go down there? And they're like, you can go wherever you want. So WED at that time was maybe, I don't know, 400, maybe 500 people or something like that. It wasn't very big. I was
Yeah.
upstairs in the Mapo building, which I knew all about because I'd seen Walt Disney downstairs walking through, talking about audio animatronics. Like, holy crap, this is the place. And
I know.
it's just like unbelievable. So, and the people there were extraordinary. Walking around and talking to people, you walk in and Blaine Gibson sculptures, oh, come here, I want to show you what I'm doing. It's like, I'm an engineer working on, drawings for Big Thunder Mountain, and here you are saying, sure, come on in and talk about this stuff. It was wild.
Yeah.
And so it got to meet a lot of extraordinary people, and I just wanted to keep learning. I had this intense desire. I remember telling my dad at the time, I just want to be somewhere where I'm like the dumbest person there and I can just learn every day.
Yeah.
And he said, with that attitude, you'll go far. I'm like, it's true. But it was really amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So
that started a long journey with Disney.
yeah. So tell us how in 1979 you snuck into the Big Thunder Mountain Railroad construction site.
Well, yeah, after I would work like 8 or 10 hours a day, and then I would drive down to Disneyland because Big Thunder Mountain was under construction. And when I worked at Disneyland, I'd go over and try and peer over the fences to see what's going on and how do they do this.
Yeah.
And security's like, hey, you aren't allowed in here, get away. And then like a day later, I had a WED ID, and I came down after work, and I drove down there intentionally to see, what would happen. And walked in and flashed my ID, and the guy's like, yeah, anything you need, just let me know. And like, just, I don't know what you guys do, just go do your thing. And I'm like, this is awesome. It's like the velvet rope just dropped.
Yeah.
So I was like, I crawled all over things just to try and understand like what's good, because it was early relative to production, so it was still going together. But and then I would go down and watch testing and everything else. And then I got my first real design challenge. Don Hilson was doing the track, and Viggo Beck Nielsen was the ride engineer. Don was doing the track, who had done the very first computer design track, by the way, that's why he was hired for Space Mountain. That was the first thing he ever did. And then he was doing the track for Big Thunder. And he said, I have a little design project. You want to give a shot at it? And I said, well, yeah. So I worked really hard for like 3 days, and I drew up everything because no computers back then, everything by hand.
Right.
And then I rolled out the drawings and presented a track switch in the maintenance area. And it was a simple little design. He goes, whoa, that's so simple and elegant. That's clever. I never would have thought of that. He goes, you stick with me. Because he realized we're paying you like, at that time, I don't know, $1.65 an hour or something. And,
Yeah.
I was nearly a graduate engineer. So it was a good deal for me to be on his project and charging
Right.
and being really cheap. And so I started getting other things. I did, for Vigo, I did a lap bar design. for the lap bars to come down and hold you in position, and then adjustments. He wanted to make some changes to the tow bars between vehicles. So I got to do stuff and then go downstairs, see the machinist build it, and then go drive down there and see it in the field. Go like, oh, that's cool. It works.
Wow.
I remember the first time I saw the switch down there, I go, oh, that's so awesome. Like I drew it like a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and here it is built and installed. And it's like, this is amazing.
Wow.
It was really cool. It was just great fun. I'm going like, whoa, this is awesome. Wow. So that was just, of course, the beginning on a trivial little thing that no one cares about on the backside of a great attraction. But yeah, got to influence rather more than that later on.
So you also worked on the Wedway People Mover in Houston?
Yes. Another project where things were just beginning to get going on Epcot. And so this was kind of like the only commercial project that WED ever had done, actually. Right. They were contracted to do that when they installed the Wedway in 1972 in Florida. It was like envisioning these are going to be everywhere, like the monorail at Anaheim, right. 1960. Okay. Like they'll be across every city in the country. Like, yeah, it didn't happen. But people actually contracted that Houston Intercontinental Airport contracted for a Wedway People Mover to go around this was before they had their larger system to run between all the terminals, and the airport had grown, but early on between the hotel and the terminal. So it was a smaller system. And many, many, many years later, working in Houston, I met a gentleman who we were working with at a hotel there. And I went over on the transportation system and went down an elevator and popped out and saw the station. I did the station design. So the doors that open and close, the vehicle's completely passive. There's no power on board. It's all powered by limbs. So when it gets to the station, how do you open the door on the vehicle? So I had to come up with a way to grab the door and unlock it with the door in the station, then power the door in the station open, and that slid the door open on the vehicle and then closed at the end and let go of it. And then it moved on its way. Yeah. And the doors opened to the elevator, and I see this. I'm like, oh my God, I designed that in 1979 and it's still running today. And this was 2010, something like that. So I'm like, whoa, that's pretty cool. 41 years later, whatever it was. It's like, wow, still running.
Yeah.
Still today.
So tell us about the secret UAE pavilion at Epcot that we've never seen.
Not secret, but as much as just never got built, so no one knows about it. But another thing, the Epcot, like I said, was just getting really going, and they were hiring. Things were getting more busy, and so there was United Arab Emirates had been in discussions. I believe Tony actually went to Abu Dhabi and sat there in a hotel for a week and a half, I think he told me, or 10 days, waiting for the sheikh, and never got a meeting, and then flew back like, okay, this is not happening. But we did a layout, and it was given to me because, again, I'd done some other earlier stuff, and they're like, yeah, you could probably handle this. So I did a track layout, and then they basically said, well, you can be the project engineer for the ride vehicle. So I got to lay out the ride vehicle, which is a flying carpet that seated 9 people, 3 rows of 3, lap bars, 2 overhead different rails, so you could make it go up and down, so they could, move like a magic carpet flies throughout the whole thing. So that was really, really fun. And yeah, I got to do all those drawings, and they're in a file drawer somewhere because obviously never got built. But
so
yeah,
all this time you're still finishing college, and then your college program and you have to leave, right? You go back to Disney.
What happened was is the co-op program is basically you're working full time. You're just getting college credit for that. So I wasn't doing courses at that time at all.
Oh, okay.
I was if you will, sort of on leave from my regular curriculum, and it was all about work. So, but you do get you get credit for the course credit for that. Right. Then, so after 9 months, that term ended, and I wanted to go. I was going back to Disneyland, but I talked to the chief engineer, Bill Watkins, and asked him to try and arrange that I didn't go back into merchandise, but I worked at engineering at the park, so I could learn about that maintenance support role and see how things happen in the real world. Yeah. And so he had talked to Bill Gare and Jerry Hefferly, who were the chief engineer and lead of the department, and they were all excited about it. I hope. I think they were. I've talked to them many times, and they said they were. So, but by the time I transferred down, I went back into merchandise on Main Street, and I was like not happy about this. So I stormed into the senior executive at Disneyland, into his office, and basically said, hi, my name's Chris Brown, and been at WED, and I'm coming back to the park, and we were supposed to have a thing set up so that I could work in engineering. And he goes, oh yeah, I know all about that. And I'm like, oh, well, that's a good news. So you at least know about this. And he basically blew me off, like, yeah, just be patient. It'll all happen. I'm like, I, I have like, 6 months and I'm out of school. I don't have time. I want to learn things now. And I've been up at WED and I'm going back there. So help me out here. And he's like, just be patient. Like, you little kid, you annoy me, go away. So he completely blew me off. I was really upset. I walked across the park. I went backstage to the engineering offices where it was lunchtime and the guys are all sitting back there playing cards. And I walked in and I said, hey, and they go, oh my gosh, hey, so good to see you. He goes, yeah, it looks like we're going ahead with this thing. And I went, wait, what? And I thought, that jerk knew the whole time we're doing this and he wouldn't even tell me. He was just playing with me. I am such a fool. Oh, I must look like an idiot. And he goes, and I told him, I said, oh my God, I just talked to him. He goes, wait, what? And I told him what I did. And they go, well, he just called like 5 minutes ago and said, we're going ahead with this. And I went, oh my God, that's how this works. So never take no for an answer.
Yeah.
Or you're going to get fired, but one way or the other, it'll end.
So what did they do? They give you a pile of things they couldn't fix and
Well, I
told you.
got hired as an associate engineer at the park, and they gave me this black book of stuff that they'd all sort of been working on for years and things that didn't work. And I just sort of went through those and tried to figure it out and solve them all. I did not get through the whole book. I did not solve them all, but I absolutely solved some and made headway. And they're going like, oh, I never thought of that. So yeah, it was a great experience. And at that time, the park was closed on Mondays and Tuesdays.
Right.
So we had little Honda scooters, and I'd sit there with drawings and driving across the park and zip up to go to the maintenance, up by the monorail and train stations stuff back way on the other side of the park. So rather than going all the way around, you just cut right across the park because it was open. Nobody cared. There's nobody there.
Right.
So those days are gone.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a great experience to see firsthand what the aftermath is after, we at WED would design something, then hand it over to the park maintenance engineering and operations crews and then walk away and like, good luck.
Right.
And so this was like, you guys handed us this and, these things do not work the way we need them to for us to be able to keep it running. So we got to make a change.
Right.
And I learned about all kinds of things like that serve me well in design. For instance, certain demographics like to break things. So in the Haunted Mansion, kids will put their feet up on the lap bar and push it till it snaps and falls forward. And they'll go like, oh, I broke it. And that's done with a little roll pin. So underneath the cars come by and they just line it up and it takes like 30 seconds max to put the new pin in and off go to the next one. So it's really easy to fix.
Yeah.
Because it's designed as a fuse, if you will, if somebody's really trying to break it. So nothing major breaks at all.
Right.
But the kid thinks like, oh, I broke it. So I'm a hero. It's like, no, you're a jerk. But anyway, but it's easy to fix and keep it running. So on to the next one. So it's like, oh, I see. Because people are going to do dumb things.
Yeah.
And that, like I said, I've learned lessons there in the park, seeing things that you just think about during design, and it helps you do things in a way that makes it easy for maintenance and operations to utilize the products we put together. Not just like, oh, it's really cool, but you can't run it.
Right, exactly. So we're here in 1980, you graduate Cal Poly Pomona, and you get to go back to WED, and they put you on probably one of the most challenging attractions they've ever built, Spaceship Earth.
Spaceship Earth was good fun. Yeah. Actually, I think we did Star Tours before that.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, Star Tours. Star Tours was right when I came back, and then Spaceship Earth, was basically like I said, we did not have CAD systems the way we do now. In fact, during Epcot, Disney had one of the very first automated drawing systems, and it was a separate room over at a different building with 3 giant hard drives with sliding doors and air conditioning in there to keep it cool to run the computer, which was 3 vertical stacks. And then there was a big board, and Paul Beck-Nielsen, who's the drafter, who was assigned to that to figure out how to make this something useful. And it was, I don't know, it was like $1 million system or something that aerospace had used, but nobody else could ever afford something like that.
Right.
So we had an early version of that to try and figure out how to model and draw things using a computer. But I didn't have anything like that. Yeah. So What I had was math. And so I had all the structural drawings. So that I forget, Doug Stapp was the overall project engineer, and I forget the structural engineer's name. But anyway, I worked with Kent Bingham, I know, on that stuff. But anyway, he was the chief engineer, structural engineer. But basically all the drawings. So I took the drawings and created a mathematical model of where this warped, three-dimensional curved slab of concrete between the structural steel, this whole radial horizontal structural steel beams, and then it wraps in between them in a big helix, basically going all the way up, and it changes the slope and angle and everything else. So it's kind of a huge three-dimensional mess. And so I had to interpolate where the ride track sat on that and what the elevation would be, and then guess to design the track, which has ties every few feet with round steel pipes, how high the concrete would be at each leg, to guess where the leg would be to see how tall to make it so it would sit on that. And so I did that. And the way that was done was originally like Fortran cards. We eventually got like a daisy whale printer, and I had a telephone connection for our printer that would go in a big foam modem to a computer at UCLA. And then I would type everything in, key it in, and then run the program, and I would come out with just sheets of papers with numbers. And then those I'd translate the coordinate systems into sketches that I would do and hand to Louis Lemoyne and Joe Whitehead, who were the two design drafters that worked with me at that time. And they would translate them into beautiful drawings that would go to the shop, and things would get built and then it would get built in Florida at the central shops and then sent down to the field. And my very first trip would have been 1980. Oh, there we go. That was actually, I was there a little before that because it wasn't completely closed in the first trip, but that is exactly, you can see the helix, so the concrete running up there. Yeah. And so my first trip, I was basically told like, hey, they're having problems with the track. You need to get on a plane and get down there and go figure out what to do. And I'm like, so my first trip to Florida will also be my last. So I'm this, young engineer coming down to Florida and going out to see something that made sense to me as a math model, but now we were in the real world, guys, and oh my God. So I got out there and went out in the field, and they had a piece of track sitting there on the concrete, and good old boys, contractor types out there and like, yeah, what the hell are we supposed to do with this thing? And what's supposed to be up like that? And I said, oh, no, you jack it up there, and this like sits on the side at the time, then it slides up and down. You get it like an inch off the ground. That's where you tack weld it, and then the whole thing goes together. And he goes, oh, that's really simple. We could do that. And I'm like, I'm not getting fired. This is great. Yes. So I didn't get fired, and we built and installed the track, which was good fun. And while we're doing that, I also designed the track for Journey into Imagination with Tom Morris and Tony Baxter, and then built test tracks for each of those. We did the test track for Imagination in California inside the Wedway People Mover test track in the parking lot. And then we did the Spaceship Earth test track in Florida outside the central shops. And as we were running that, I noticed some issues with the rotation mechanism and some other things. And I wrote these notes like the ride engineer, and copied the chief engineer going like, oh, I'm seeing this. I don't know. This looks like a problem, and I don't know what's going on. But, I'm just a stupid young kid. So I'm just pointing this out. Like, you're looking at this, right? And it was like, pat the kid on the head. Like, yeah, okay, it's going to be fine. We'll let the, real engineers deal with this. I'm like, okay. Well, it turns out that ride had lots of problems when we got in the building because we had no time to change anything. It was too late, and we were on a massive schedule. So we installed this, and there's like 110 feet of elevation change for the building. It's like 154-foot height to the top. Wow. And there's a lot of elevation change, and you have a chain of vehicles that basically means at the top, it's in massive tension because the chain wants to go down. And at the bottom, it's in massive compression. So if you think about a series of vehicles going around a tight corner and they're all pushing on each other, they want to pop out at the bottom, and at the top, they want to rip apart. So the ride system is basically this massive chain draped over this thing, and then the motors push it up the hill to go up, and they try and brake on the downside to stop it from coming down the hill. So you're trying to push the mass all the way up to reduce the chain loads through the ride system everywhere. So one night, we were trying to adjust motors and just figuring out how to make the whole thing work. One of the tow bars broke, rod end snapped down in the tightest radius down at the bottom, and the vehicle popped up out of the track and the vehicles just mashed together. It was a very loud bang, and it was pretty messy. So, and I came, this radios, and I'm like, oh no, e-stop, people hammer it, and then you run down there and you see the vehicles like mated, and it's like, oh, that's not good. So, I mean, we had to chain falls to pull them apart and everything else, but that's what happens when the system's not properly balanced, is the loads just get crazy.
Yeah.
And so shortly after that, the ride engineer was no longer there. And I got a call and they said, you saw this coming, you fix it. And so I'm like, okay. So I became a ride project engineer, and I was there living inside Spaceship Earth about for a year and a half to fix things and get it working right. So we got it open, and there was problems with the rotation mechanism. And I came up with an incredibly simple, dumb way to rotate the vehicles. And I showed that to on drawings to Ron Schrichten, who was the head of maintenance for Epcot. And he's like, that looks weird. I don't see how that'll work. So we built a test rig on the Imagination test track at WED in the parking lot,
Yeah.
and set it up. And he came out, flew out. We built these little cams that turn it around, little wheels on each corner of the vehicle, and put it up there. And I had him sit on it. And just first he wouldn't sit on it, so I said, I'll sit on it, and went through there. And then he sat on it, and he went through, and he goes, damn, that is so simple. And I said, simple is beautiful, man. So we ended up installing that into the ride. They gave me 2.5 days to shut down the ride and basically go in and rip out all of the epicyclic gear train cams that rotated the vehicles and put in the system that I designed. And so I never left the building. I went in and was there continuously, and welders were coming on 12-hour shifts. They're like, you must be making a hell of a lot of money. I'm making a fortune. I said, I'm salaried. This doesn't get any different than just working 40 hours and going to the gym at night. So there's a great picture, which I wish I had, of to show you, because at the end, all the executives are standing up the top watching the vehicles rotate, and at the very end is this slumped over shell of a person, which was me, wearing a Mickey Rat t-shirt, all dirty and scruffy with a 3-day beard. It's like our hero. And it worked great. So it's obviously still running. So anyhow, that was a lot of learning, and I was like, wow, you really want to test things before you get to the field, make sure they're running right. And they started doing that, but didn't really pay attention and do it right. So I got to fix it, and there we are.
Yeah.
But again, lessons I took forward. So that was Epcot. And Imagination, we didn't have such problems. We had other challenges, but there's stories for another day. I do want to point out one thing, though, because you had mentioned Tom Morris earlier. And one of the first drawings I got from him, which was the layout of the track for me to turn into a real track, it was just, he'd drawn circles around through the show sets, and we want to go fast here, and this goes downhill. So I was like, okay, that's all cool. And he wrote in big notes and put a big cloud bubble around it. It said, note, this information is subject to and will change, all in caps. I'm like, Tom, I get it. It's early days. Don't worry, we're not going to build it tomorrow. I just need to start drawing something, and we can change bits and get it right. So we make adjustments. That's what you do. It's an iterative, collaborative process.
Yeah.
But those were early days for Tom, of course. It was like his first layout, and good fun. Imagination was a really, really fun attraction too.
Yeah. So let's go to 1984, where your dream sort of shatters and you're a victim of the Epcot layoffs, which
we downsized, as they say these days. So we were up to like 2,600 people at WED for Tokyo Disneyland and Epcot. And then we shrunk down to like, I don't remember what it was, around 300 or something total. So it was a rather significant layoff. And my department, which was 520 show ride mechanical engineering, went from, I don't remember the numbers, 145 people, 150 people, down to 7. And I was still there.
Wow.
Then they went to 6. So I was the last one laid off after Epcot. They had me doing other things. Sort of, so it was 80, through 83. When I got laid off was 83. And then I came back a year later in 84, after when there's the whole issue going on with Ron Miller and the studio being an absolute disaster, and Saul Steinberg trying to take over the company, and all the mess that was going on. And that was all part of that, as you know. And then thank God Roy Disney brought in Michael and Frank, and saved the company. And then it started changing in a very positive way. And that's when I was brought back.
Yeah. So
Um,
85, you're back and you're on Star Tours and the Great Movie Ride.
Yeah, was that Star Tours? Was that? Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
mentioned it before Spaceship Earth. You're right.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was later. Sorry for the
Yeah.
timeline jump, especially on a show like this. So
Yeah.
it's like, Joe got caught in a time warp. So the same thing happened to me.
Right. So then you
Uh,
got involved in, I mean, I was there, I started in 87, and that's when the triangle of success, I still remember the triangular markers where you could pop off the three different color markers.
that
So,
yeah, that came a little bit later because that was the byproduct of a lot of, we'll call them extremely challenging projects that were going on in
right.
the 90s. So 87 was the beginning of the entertainment pavilion at Epcot. And then I got dragged over, met with Bob Weiss and Eric Jacobson for the Great Movie Ride.
Right.
So I was, yeah, when I came back, I did Star Tours first and did all the weight balance and study for that, and went to England to meet with Rediffusion. We were buying the simulators from and got that sort of all structured and kicked off. But then I was shifted over onto Great Movie Ride. And then I learned that I was going to be the show ride engineer for the park. So if there was other things, then you have to, oh, by the way, there's a tram. So we can't afford to build a tram. So you got to find a way to spec and buy one. And if you think about it, we had basically laid off this massive brain trust of talent who had experienced everything from Epcot and Tokyo Disneyland. And
Yeah.
now we had a few people and we're trying to build stuff again. And it's like, oh my God. So I started thinking about how the hell am I going to get people to help? So we can't build this in-house. We don't have the group to do it. So I wrote a specification for the ride system for Great Movie Ride. And I enlisted input and feedback from all the maintenance people in Florida, maintenance, the shop downstairs. They're like, engineers don't talk to us. They just give us stuff to build and then snarl at us. I'm like, you guys have to build it. What's the easiest way to do this? Help me get it right. So
Yeah.
they're like, cool. So the maintenance guys in Florida, same thing. The central shops in Florida. It's like, you're going to inherit this. Because remember, I've been to the park and I know what it's inheriting. So I'm like, I'm going to eliminate the you never talk to us argument. So I went down there and they told us that nobody had ever really sat down with them and gone through how do you, what's your input to this?
Wow.
So, which kind of amazed me, to be honest. But anyway, I did it. So we ended up doing that to write the specification for the Great Movie Ride, which we then bid out as a design build package. It was eventually picked up by a group in Cincinnati, Ohio called Belcan, and then was built by Triad, did the chassis design and built those in Detroit. And then the bodies for the vehicles were built by another division of Triad down in Florida. We shipped the chassis down to Florida. Belcan and Cincinnati did all the controls and electronics. That all came together and was all married in Florida. We ran the test track because I learned, which in this case is a wire guided vehicle system with inductive coupling to recharge the batteries and just keeps running all day.
Wow.
Another whole story about that because I had to go fight for that because everybody remembered Energy Pavilion at Epcot and they're like, we're never doing that again. I said,
Right.
let's do that. They're like, are you crazy? So I had to go basically argue, and I got my way, which is that we could do this. And so we built a test track and we ran it and ran it and ran it. And we'd run the thing for, I don't know, it was 1,000 hours or something with like 0 issues before it ever went to the field. So when we got into the field, Craig Russell was doing all the buildings for the studio basically. And with Art Henderson, we were like the entire engineering team. It was like, this is not quite the right number of people, I don't think. So they had left big leave outs for where the intersections of the track would be. And I was like, fill them in. It's all solid concrete. We just come in and saw cut and lay a wire in there and then epoxy over the top of it. And we just guide off that, which we had done and demonstrated in the test track. And that's, of course, what we did in the field. And it worked just great. And we put it in. By the time when we put it in, we'd already run it, everything. So it just ran, which was much more pleasurable experience. On opening day, I was doing radio and TV interviews, not sitting at Spaceship Earth watching the ride going, please God, run long enough for the TV cameras to get off, which is what I did at Epcot. So it was a very different experience. And yeah, and then so the trams, another whole story with that, because we had a very aggressive budget for the entire park, let alone you're going to go buy a tram system. Like I said, we couldn't afford to build one. So I wrote a spec. We went out, we had things bid and awarded to a group called Chance Coach. And they build very economical trams and they'd done them for parking lots and parks around the country. And the Walt Disney World maintenance people were extremely not happy with this because they were the world's tram experts. They built a lot of them for the parks. They were building them for Epcot. They were building them for Magic Kingdom. And they said, we know how to build trams. Why are you going someplace else? Right. So eventually the answer came out, and I was basically, there was a gentleman brought in to clear house to a certain extent at WDI at that time. And so I got called on the carpet, and he's like, what do you care about this? And I was like, it's gonna more than double the price if we do this. And he's like, so? And I'm like, that was not my assignment. So I didn't realize there's an infinite wallet if you need it, which is not the way I've ever really run things. So, okay, I've been sticking to the budgets we were given. So I'm on budget for everything else we're doing. So he said, well, you just don't worry about it. You go make Catastrophe Canyon work, and you get that epic stunt theater running, and everything will just be fine. So that's what we did. So we ended up using the Walt Disney World Central Shops to build a really nice, very robust tram for multiples of the original budget. But it's really nice. It was really nice. Anyway, so yeah, tram tour. And then of course, Bob Weiss realized, oh, I can basically throw anything at you and you're just going to figure out how to do it. This is awesome. So I started getting everything. So all the, the Busby Berkeley Fountain at in the Great Movie Ride, the Tarzan swing. Oh, you could hurt somebody with that. Have Chris look at it. We have a special effects tank. We need bullet hits in there. We need a water dump tank that has to hit the side of a boat house with a guest in it. We've got a bee butt in the special effects stage, and that has to move. And so it became on and on and on and on. And oh, by the way, we've got this idea for a stunt show, and George and Michael and Jeffrey have talked, and it's going to be Indiana Jones. So please fly to Charlotte, North Carolina, and meet Glenn Randall, who's George's stunt coordinator, and figure out what in the Sam hell we have to build. And I'm like, okay, I mean, this was a fire hose of fun. So it was like way too much stuff. And I laid out a program when I started on this, that we need to hire an engineer here. We need to hire an engineer here, need to hire an engineer here to help me, man load this all the way through. And we were about, I think, 1.5 to 2 years behind when I got my first, which was Brad Borgman. And so we put him on the trams to just deal with the central shops. Extraordinary, wonderful, talented engineer, by the way. And then by the time we were doing Catastrophe Canyon tests, which of course is another extraordinary story in and of itself, and Epic Theater was coming along, we'd come up with ways to build a giant rolling ball and the sets to split and move apart. Concepts, but we needed to engineer and build those. We'd found groups who were crazy enough to work on this stuff, because I'd basically gone to Broadway houses, to film special effects houses, custom vehicle people up in show car people up in Detroit. It's like, who is like wacky and understands story and has technical ability. Of course, there's a lot of differences, in film. If it gets through the 3 takes you need, you're done. If it falls apart, no one cares. At Disneyland or Walt Disney World, if it falls apart after 3 days, you're in really big trouble. So basically our design life ranges 10 to 20 years, depending on the type of thing that you're talking about. Some shows are done for a much shorter timeline, like the Indiana Jones Epic Stunt Spectacular, which is still running today. So we don't just
running go in park show, 35 years.
I know, it's just going and going and going. So yeah, it's you just don't do things that'll just, it looks cool and then falls apart, which is basically what you can do in film. Broadway, of course, is similar in a lot of ways, but you look at their duty cycle and their number of cycles from an engineering perspective, and it's barely getting started. It's like, the longest running Broadway show, Beauty and the Beast, another thing I was called in on a decade later to, we want to make a bunch more of these and tour them all over. How can you help us? Okay, why not? But again, you look at the number of cycles and it's like a very, very, very different thing. In that case, touring shows is different again from a permanent show, because you have to deal with, roadies and the reality of stuff has to come apart and go together, and it can't just fall apart every time you do that, because that's a pretty rough existence. Anyway, so we got Disney-MGM Studios open in May 1989, an extraordinary project. And by that time, I was like, I haven't made up my own job in years. So I did it again. So I basically said, the way this is structured, as you said, at that time, we had all these other projects that were problematic. Splash Mountain in Anaheim, the Norway Pavilion at Epcot, Pleasure Island, year and a half late. The Typhoon Lagoon, wave machine and other challenges.
Right.
And Euro Disney, lots of challenges. So all these things are going on, and management's like going, boy, we got to get our grip on this. And the studio projects all worked really well. We don't know why, because we had a very experienced team who was not being bothered, and we were allowed to go work on things because all these other problems were going on, which was a wonderful blessing. Plus, it was studio park, so it was Michael, Frank, and Jeffrey Katzenberg. We met with them every month. They knew exactly what we were doing. We knew what they wanted. We told them Universal was doing something cool, and so they gave us more money. like, Michael, we heard they're doing this. I'm like, all right, fine. Here's 10 million. Add something to the back pot, which is where Catastrophe Canyon came from.
All right.
I know you've had Richard on, and he's told some of those stories. I actually think, Ryan, I think you were in that first brainstorming session, if I recall correctly, with Richard, and we were throwing around paper balls and trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
And then he refined this wacky doodle idea into the canyon layout, which was just brilliant.
Yeah.
And then we came up with a way to dump 76,000 gallons of water in 15 seconds. And that was fun. There you go. There. That was our second test when we had the gates. And we got all three canyons running. That outline there, the little angle steel in the middle, that's where the truck goes. So I wanted to prove that the water was not going to truly wash the truck away, but actually go underneath it. And the truck's higher than that, so it actually flows underneath it. But we have a hydraulic ram that pushes it down the slope, so it looks like it's being washed away by the water. But of course, we're cheating.
Okay.
So it's showbiz. Anyway, yeah, that was a great fun project.
So 1989, the park opened. So for the next 5 years, it sounds like you ran around. Let me just list some of these things, and you can pick one. We're getting tight on time.
That's what I want to do.
The second gate for Disneyland Paris, which was Disney-MGM Studios Europe. The second gate for Tokyo, which was also going to be a Disney-MGM Studios park. Disney's America, a traveling show, and expansion projects like Tower of Terror, Muppet Vision 3D, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, the Mystery Rider Theater that never happened, the Dick Tracy Gangster Shootout that never happened. Then you went to work with Tony Baxter on Westcott and Long Beach Disney Sea, and then you worked with Joe Rohde on Animal Kingdom. So you were a busy guy for 5 years, even more so.
Very, very, yeah. Basically, I helped draft portions of the Triangle of Success to try and help reorganize things. So the whole point was we sort of restructured the organizational way that things move through WDI. And my point was you need to have somebody from Show Ride who understands these things early so that they can guide them in a correct direction and we don't waste time. And basically everybody bought into that. So I became the first technical director and first concept engineer for WDI, for WED. Wow. So I was responsible for guiding the technical direction, establishing the technical direction for everything that WED was doing. So that was a lot. And we'd actually hire another guy to try and help out with that. But it's very difficult to find somebody with the appropriate level of experience, the technical expertise, and the storytelling understanding to work, with everybody. So Tony always complained. He's like, yeah, Weiss gets to use you and I have to use other people, and that's not fair. So like, I do what I can, but I'm only 3 people. I can only spend so much time.
Right.
So helped launch a lot of things. Spent 2.5 years on TDS, which is a great park. And again, just establishing directions of what we would do and helping to define things.
Yeah.
Gangster Shootout, which you mentioned, which was a great attraction that we developed, was great fun. They were doing the Dick Tracy film at the time, and we took all the sets that Vittorio Storaro had designed for the movie. We set them up in a warehouse off Sheldon Street, and then we got a Chrysler Imperial 8, 1932, if I recall correctly. And I took that and drove that with Michael and Frank and Jeffrey through a slalom of things with fog and people popping up with Tommy guns and shooting at us. Wow. And it was a great concept that did not get built. But what I pitched as the world's largest slot car, eventually from Gangster Shootout, which we built a prototype of, then it turned into the GM test track, and then it turned into, in Cars Land, Radiator Springs Racer. So it did find a life later, but no good ideas truly die. They just get put aside for a while and become something else.
Right. Yeah, that's true. So with all this happening, 1994 hits and you decide to leave Disney.
Yes, something I never thought I would do. The ideal perfect dream job in the perfect place. Small groups of people going off and spending $1 billion on a project is it's just an extraordinary place with tons of creative people. But Frank Wells passed away, and when that in a helicopter skiing accident, and when that happened, it shattered Michael's. He'd been dealing with all the BS on the company as the president, and all
Yeah.
that dumped on Michael, and it really changed things a lot. So I had a meeting with him about the traveling show, something else you never saw.
Yeah.
John DeSantis and I had come up with, and we were pitching, and Frank had like said, "Don't worry, I know how to get this funded." And we had a meeting with Michael to get it funded just after Frank had died, and he paced back and forth saying, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And I said, Michael, this is less than Disneyland was in 1955. It's not a big deal. This doesn't even show up on the balance sheet. Just let us go do it. He's like, I don't know what to do. And he walked out. And I turned to John and I went, we just lost this. It's gone. And it did not happen. And a lot of projects sort of went that way. And I felt like, wow, I've designed and built a lot of things, and we are talking about a lot of stuff, and we're not building things, and it's just like driving me crazy. And everybody in the backlash following on from the Triangle of Success era was manage, 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 control the cost. This is getting out of hand. Mind you, we were on budget with Studio Tour. Just point that out. But a lot of other projects were not. And so it was like, you've got to get a handle on these guys. And so I ended up resigning in 1994, and I went to Spectra Effects, which was a group I had hired from the film effects industry to consult with us and help guide them in how to support us as a theme park industry company for Catastrophe Canyon. They're water effects and done all kinds of things. Academy Award, I called them the Bob's McDonald, because it was Bob Sr. and Bob Jr. And he'd won Bob Sr. won Academy Award for Ben-Hur and The Longest Day, and done all kinds of extraordinary things. Brilliant, brilliant people. Bob McDonald Jr., a very clever designer from the film industry, had blown up lots of things, including our gates for our first water test at Catastrophe Canyon. It's really a fun day. But anyway, so I went there and helped grow that company significantly by basically bringing the contacts and credibility into them for the location-based entertainment business. We did work for Disney immediately. We did work for Universal Studios. T2 3D, we did initial concept development on that, a screen transition and a motorcycle idea, which we ended up building for them. So the motorcycle running around with Arnold. And then the screen transition, the fog cannons, we had a patent on that comes blasting out at the audience. And then other, Waterworld, which is another extraordinary one where they were changing the Miami Vice stunt show and wanted to do something with this film they were shooting called Waterworld. And they brought us in to review their layouts. And they had a really lame ass idea of the walls opening up and a plane pushing through. And I said, this is like really not right. So I pitched the idea of throwing the plane through the air, through the wall.
Wow.
And they said, well, so it's on a cable? And I said, no. And it goes, well, how do you know what's going to land? And I said, physics. So we actually have 5 anemometers on the top of the sets running around and on top of the shade structure over the audience. And we profile the wind so we know what's going on. And then if it passes a certain threshold, predicting what will happen in the future, because of course you can't do, once you've launched it, it's hands off, but you have a pretty good idea what's going to happen. The same way we predict weather so accurately, but this is only seconds. So we're really actually very good at it and have never had a problem, and just literally throw it through the air. We did all fire, the pyro, the wave machines, the water cannons, the falling tower, a bunch of other stuff. So, and that show's been going a long time too. And it was a replacement show that was to be done quick and dirty to fix Miami Vice, and it's still going today. Much more popular than the movie, and more people have seen it, I think. So anyway, but movie's not that bad. It's just it wasn't a blockbuster. That's all. And then so the Spectra effects grew and then died. It went into bankruptcy, and that was really painful. We had a contract with Universal and a contract with Disney at the time. Negotiated a change and finished the rocket rods for Disney. Universal said, you can't do this to us. And we're like, actually, we can. We're in Chapter 11, so we can reject your contract, which we did, and they sued us. So it's just it would have been so much cheaper and better for them to put the money. We would have finished. We built the Pteranodon flyers for Islands of Adventure. At any rate, so that company died. And then in 2000, we formed Contour Entertainment with Richard Vaughn from Spaceship Earth. And of course, he was with us at Spectra. I'd kind of stolen him away from Universal at the time. And Bob Jocelyn, who I worked with and still is here in the building at the Marine Corps, but worked with him at Disney for years before we all left there. And then Ted Burleson, who was at Craig Russell, Bob Gurr, Dave Schweninger.
Oh, right.
Sequoia Creative.
Sequoia
Creative. When we did Catastrophe Canyon, I had them do the sliding truck and a few of the other show action equipment things that we wanted animated in there. And Ted was like, became a big fan. And so when he was at Universal, he hired us at Spectra to work on things. And then he eventually jumped over and worked at Spectra, the project management vice president. And then he was the fourth co-founder for Contour.
Oh, okay.
And then, and then that started a whole nother journey. So we've worked in 14 countries around the world. We've done stuff all over the place. We've invented things. We've done little retail installations in Dubai for Mattel, and we've done 30,000 acre destination master plans and everything in between. So yes, it's been a very full career, busy career, and a lot of fun and a lot of learning, and a lot of extraordinary people and extraordinary projects. Standing in front of Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, His Highness the Emir and ruler of Qatar in Doha during the shock and awe phase going on up in Iraq. Wow. It's very weird that they called us out then to design a park and he had no idea what he wanted. So we had 2 weeks to come up with ideas, went and pitched it. The cab driver's like, so you're with the press? And I'm like, no. And he goes, what are you doing here? And I go, well, they called, we answered, we're here. And he's like, there's no one here. I'm like, I know, but that's okay. We had a secret location, went in past the barricades and the armed guards to the palace to pitch with him. And he walks in and goes, so what do we have? And I said, I want to be respectful of your time, Your Highness. So we have a lot to show you. And so I can do a 5-minute presentation or a 45-minute presentation. So you need to tell me how much time you have. And he goes, 20 minutes. And I said, okay, but if you ask questions, we're going to go over. And he laughed. And I'm like, oh, I got it. Yeah. So we went for nearly an hour and he loved it. And we designed and built an extraordinary project, or did not build, we designed a project for Doha called Entertainment City. It was a wonderful, wonderful project.
Wow.
But yeah, all kinds of crazy stories. We were the first group to really work in the Middle East. Worked for Sheikh Mohammed in Dubai in '97. Yeah, this is Entertainment City. That's one of the aerials early on, figuring out what it might be. Hey, that's a model presentation for the Entertainment City. Wow, look at that. Look at that nice guy with not gray hair.
So for a lot of people in our industry who know you well, Chris, we know that you like the color purple, not the movie, but the actual color purple. Tell us how this became, your version of the Joe Rohde earrings.
Yes, well, I liked, I went to film school. I love light and color and design and how that affects things emotionally and how that all connects. And purple is a royal color. There's all kinds of history behind it and everything else. So I had a couple purple shirts that had purple in them. And I got this cool pair of purple pants, which sounds really, a bit flaming at this point, but it was what it was at the time. They were dark purple. It wasn't like, Mylar or anything, but deep purple. Yeah. So anyway, and so people were like, what is this little purple? I'm like, that's funny. People really notice this. I mean, I have blue, I have green, I have all kinds of different things. And the purple's the one they're like, what is that about? So I decided to see sort of how far I could push this. So I started getting other things. So during the studio project, I had a pair of Nike boots that were purple. They're purple and gray, but they were purple. I had painted my hard hat purple. And everybody's sort of saying Mr. Purple instead of Mr. Brown. But it's like, it's just cool. So it was just kind of a fun thing, but it really became a signature. Yeah. So it's in our company logo. I mean, it's been like all over the place, So yeah, purple, definitely, it's true that you would remember that. Is not shocking because it was something that happened, but it was never, purple's never been my favorite color, but it was a signature color, a trademark. So it's like, yeah, why not? That's all good. Okay. And I like purple, it's cool. But we pushed all kinds of things. Our offices got painted purple on the inside, not the outside. But,
right.
anyway, yeah, lots of that. It's just noticing what people react to and paying
Yeah.
attention,
Yeah.
and then saying like, and then kind of playing with it. Like, you
Right.
know, it's like, if they notice this, I wonder if they really noticed it, or if that was just an off comment. It's like, wow, you do this and people really notice. It's amazing.
Yeah. That's
It's
great.
true. It is true.
So what does the future hold for Chris Brown? Are you got a novel, a movie? What's coming up in the future?
Holly is the writer in the family. So she wrote the biography for the Scarecrow from The Wizard of Oz. So
Ooh,
Ray Bolger, the actor. So it's what's called
wow.
More Than a Scarecrow. At any
Yeah.
rate, so yeah, that's probably she could write one that I could dictate maybe.
Well, you've taught a lot of classes. We didn't really go into it, but you've taught creativity at Cal
Yeah,
Poly.
I started teaching creativity at Cal Poly Pomona about 1980, and I taught for like 10 years there.
Wow.
Whenever I could
Yeah.
go over, I would sneak over. When I got laid off, I taught technical writing and machine design labs and other things too. But creativity was definitely my thing, which is
Yeah.
basically studying, understanding how your brain works and how to shift between L mode and R mode, between rational, deductive, analytical thinking and visual, spatial, holistic thinking. And that is very well served in our industry because basically understanding how things work in terms of space and light visually, and understanding how they work technically is the way that you build things. So you
Yeah.
have to get past, understand the story structure and how this all works. And what I would do with designers all the time is sit down when they say, we want to add a magic effect. And Jim Steinmeier and I will always get called into meetings like, we want magic. It's like, why? So we would make them basically have designers go back and tell me what you want this scene to be. What is the intention? Why do you want something in here? What's the point?
Right.
So when you go back to the story structure and character development and what the point is of this scene in the context of the overall ride, they go, oh, I know that. When they explain that, then you can ask questions like, is it okay if it's on the left side of the track instead of the right side? And they're like, yeah, I don't care. I go, okay, good. Because behind the wall on the right side is another scene and it's only like 2 feet of depth. On the left side, there's a maintenance area. And we could push that back and give you 15 feet. That gives us lots of room to build structure and things that can reach through the wall. So I was always telling people, don't try and figure out how to do things. Just tell me why you want to do it and what the story should be. Pretend
Well,
you're an animated movie and you can do anything. And then
tell us about how you decided how much water you needed for Cat Canyon with Richard.
Well, that's a perfect example of that. So, and Richard is, of course, a great friend, and one of my favorite people from Disney, who we've worked together for decades and still good friends.
Yeah.
But he came up with the idea of how this would structure and play to people. And he said, I want the water comes down here. And I said, well, how much water? And he goes, well, I don't know, a lot of water. I go, well, no, I don't mean tell me gallons. What I mean is tell me what your reaction is to it. I said, is it over your head? Is it scary? You want people frightened? You want people to think they're going to get wet? What do you want? I said, do you want to scare them or just go like, oh, that's funny? He goes, no, I want to scare them. I said, so it's like above their head. Like, yeah. I'm like 5 feet above their head, 10 feet above their head. He goes, yeah, like 8 feet above their head. That'd be awesome. I'm going, okay. I go, and it's like white and spraying and flying everywhere. And he goes, yeah, yeah, yeah. So I went through that and then said, okay, well, if it's aerated, then we can, reduce the density about this much. And we can do that with air cannons throwing up and spreading it out. We have this much space, so we got to cover all of that. And I basically just went through quick math and said, okay, you probably need 2 75 horsepower mixed flow vertical turbine pumps. And he's like, what? And I said, Richard, if you don't speak, Swahili, and somebody comes up and talks to you, it just is gobbledygook. But if you do, it just makes perfect sense. And I said, the reality I've discovered is I speak 2 languages.
Yeah.
So I speak show design from a creative storytelling perspective, and I speak engineering.
Yeah.
So I just translate between the 2. That's all it is. And that's what basically did.
Yeah.
So, and then we came up with ways to make it all work that way. And how much water do you need to dump? Because if you dump less, that's good in terms of the cycle time and the energy consumed and on and on and on.
Right.
And then we dump the water from overhead to sort of fill that in. And it goes like a curtain that kind of closes the show, but it also is like a whole crap load more water dumped right over your head.
Yeah.
And then you have to get that water back up. So it comes down and circulates back into a closed system that pumps it back up and be ready for the next show.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good fun one. 13 months from the initial brainstorming session till we were running the canyon.
Wow.
That was crazy. And Richard wrote this note back to Marty, basically going like, it's unbelievable. You can't believe this. It's so cool. So yeah,
Yeah,
Good fun.
great. So we always ask at the end of our adventure, Chris, now that we're back in modern day with all these decades of experience and, things you've seen, things you've worked on, what have you determined can make a guest experience timely yet timeless?
Timely things reflect contemporary periods in technology and everything else. When we had the Rasta Man, this was the dawn of virtual reality, came to WDI, and I was one of two people, Marty Sklar, sent to go look at this and talk to this guy and then come tell me what you think. And I think it was Steve Kirk or somebody, but we went, we experienced it, we came back, and I said, this is an awesome design tool, but it's completely wrong for theme parks. And Steve was like, this thing is so cool, look at all this stuff. I said, yeah, but what you can do is inherently isolating from other people. That's the antithesis of what theme park experience wants to be.
Right.
The whole point is when you come in person, you want to experience things as a group. Humans are socially interactive, human beings want to interact with other people. I said, this is going to be the future of video games. This is going to be, I can't even imagine what's going to happen. At that time, we didn't. We spent a bunch of money doing an Aladdin flying carpet ride to sort of test it in a park atmosphere. Massive cost, very low throughput, the same problems I pointed out in the beginning. It was cool, but it doesn't work as a Disney scale throughput attraction. So, but that kind of makes the point. So technology is locked in time. So steampunk tells you where you are in time, and virtual reality punts you, way, way, way further. Yes, you can do steampunk inside virtual reality. I get it. I know. That's all cool. And by the way, I do like going to the metaverse and, we go and play lightsaber and all those things. It's fun. I enjoy that. It's just not a theme park thing.
Yeah.
So attractions are, and we've done, like I said, small things and big things, and attractions are different for different reasons in the context of their business model and how they have to handle capacity and throughput and operational viability and everything else.
Right.
We did a game for Dave and Buster's, which got beat crap up. We built life-size Rock'em Sock'em robots, a timely concept, but people literally beat the living crap out of them. And we had like no time to develop and deliver 90 games, I think we delivered to all the Dave and Buster's. And they lived for a while till COVID hit, and then COVID shut down their stores. And then it's like, well, these are high maintenance costs and we have no money. So those are all going. I'm like, that sucks, but I understand. Yeah. So it's a different thing in terms of throughput. So timeliness and understanding things is paying attention to the time that you're in and what's going on. And that is something we always stress with people in terms of the context of an attraction and the story that you choose. I hate seeing, IP just dumped into something, stuffing a Marvel movie into Abu Dhabi or anywhere. It's like, well, okay, that's part of the common culture around the world. And I get that, and it has its place, and I don't have a problem with that. But if you do something that ties into regional stories, when you travel a lot, as we all do in this industry, you get to really get immersed and appreciate local stories and culture.
Yep.
And Richard told this story, I think, in his interview, but when we started working for Sheikh Mohammed in Dubai, we came up with this whole thing. It was Sheikh Ahmed was the second one, because the first one was, don't want to get into that whole mess. But anyway, for Qatar, we came up with this expression, which Richard researched and found out, which basically means perhaps it was, perhaps it wasn't, but long ago it is told, because you can't lie in the eyes of Allah. So it's a disclaimer at the front of the story you're about to tell, and is basically the same equivalent as once upon a time. It puts people in a very nostalgic mood. So understanding your audience, the very first thing, you have to know who you're talking to and who you're communicating with, and relating to them. When you know who your audience is, you're going to use different things, different language, whatever it is, and different references. So I think things that really become timeless are things that link to a cultural heritage, link to a space, link to what's going on there, as opposed to things that just like dropped in and overlaid on top of it that make it's a total non sequitur and you walk into it. Not that that can't work, it absolutely can. And the internet, making the world smaller is absolutely true. Transportation made the world smaller. Flying around the world made the world smaller. The internet absolutely shrunk the world. It created the Arab Spring and all these things, the uprising and communication and sharing knowledge around the world. It's an extraordinary thing and an extraordinary time. Yeah. So having those things that work across that sort of reality, that works too. But I really like celebrating local cultures, local stories, everything else, and bringing those up. Like think of giving the Disney treatment to small villages in somewhere where their capacity is, if we do 300 people a day, we're thrilled.
Right. Yeah.
You don't spend $1 billion to do that. It makes no sense.
Right.
But you do spend some money and do something. But if you use a local story, then the people who are from there take ownership of it.
Right.
I took ownership of Disneyland. It was like my park. People would come visit us. We're going to Disneyland. It's like mine. People in America take ownership of that, absolutely, and should.
Yeah.
You can do that with stories all over the world.
Yeah.
And it's really fun to connect to those people and have them go like, oh my God, that's great. We did a park in Mumbai, India. Was all that. It was all local things. The Wrath of the Gods attraction, which we did as a turnkey design build.
Wow.
Nothing but Indian stories and legends.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and for people traveling, I want to come and learn about the local culture, the stories, and the history.
Right.
I don't necessarily want a Cartoon Network theme park in Bali.
Right. If you go to Bali and it's Nickelodeon, right?
Yeah.
What? Slime? No.
I know.
Where's Bali?
People, developers out there, I hope you're listening. Listen to Chris.
It is true. It is true.
Well, Chris, we went over about 14, 15 minutes, but thank you so much for joining us. Fascinating journey, incredible life, amazing career. And I'm sorry Joe's not here to join us, but I hope he's watching in spirit, wherever he is. Actually, find him right now, back in 1979. So
right.
Stick around. We'll be back. And thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you all.
All right. We hoped you enjoyed the ride. Good. I wanted to make sure I wasn't muted. But we hoped you enjoyed the ride. Thank you so much to our friend Chris Brown for time traveling with us today. If you have questions for Chris, stick around for our live Q&A in just 60 seconds. On behalf of Zeitgeist Design and Production, we thank you for spending an hour of your time with us on the Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. If you enjoyed the journey, please check out all 35 of our time travel adventures on our YouTube channel or under the Zoomcast section at zeitgeist-usa.com. They're also available as podcasts wherever you listen. The time machine is going in for repairs in July, so please plan now to join us on Friday, August 16th, when our passenger will be our first legitimate example of British royalty, the 5-time Oscar-winning founder and creative director of Weta Workshop, Sir Richard Taylor.
Get it.